Early last month, I set out with the goal of building a screen door and getting the opening all trimmed out and ready to hang the door, getting the door hung, and making it all one video. Unfortunately, things don't always go according to plan, and while the project's going smoothly, I don't have all of that done. I do have the screen door done, and I thought I would share that process with you today. This project starts off with a couple of longer boards that I put a scarf joint in back when we were doing the shop door project. So if you want to see how that was done, you can go back to that project and look at that. But wait until after this video and then go watch that video. These are a little bit long to conveniently run through my 6-inch joiner. So I'm going to do most of the edge joining by hand and get these nice and straight. Power tools can be quick and efficient, but hand tools can solve a lot of problems where you can't get the material into the power tool conveniently. Of course, the beginning of every project really is just milling the materials and getting everything to even dimensions. And this is where power tools really excel to get repeatable thicknesses and widths and cut lengths, all that. Unfortunately, I am running out of materials for projects like this. This is some of that really nice Ponderosa Pine we got down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Bought it for the loom project I was working on for Janet, and have built a few other projects with it. But I'm just about out, and I don't have materials as long as I would like for some of this. I don't have enough material, for instance, to do mortise and tenon joints to hold the rails to the stiles. So I'm going to be using something different for that. We'll look at that in a minute. And as a result, I don't want through grooves or dados cut on most of this. The rails can have dados that come all the way out, but the stiles cannot. I need stopped grooves on that, and for that I'm using the router table. This isn't something I've done much of. It always makes me a little bit nervous to lower pieces onto a spinning router bit, but it's also a fairly common practice for a lot of people, so it's not something that I'm inventing here. It's actually something I probably first saw Norm Abrams do in the New Yankee Workshop. The lower part of this door is panel frame construction, but the upper part needs to receive a removable screen frame so that the screen can be taken out and repaired if necessary in the future. So that means I need rabbets on the top part of the door, again, that don't go all the way through. So I'm using a similar approach on the router table for that. The panels, of course, are too wide to go through my planer, so I'm going to hand plane those. And for these, I am using some basswood. Basswood is soft and easy to carve. One of the key features of this door is that I'm going to do some carved rosettes on these panels. Always been interested in wood carving, and I've done some here and there throughout the years, but it's been a very long time since I've taken any of it seriously. And this will represent dipping my toes back into that water of wood carving, and it's something I really procrastinated on because I didn't want to screw it up. So I picked a relatively simple design, I think, and this is based on some of the carving seen on doors in the Fession House or the Taos Art Museum. Someday we'll take a little video tour of that and look at some of the wood carvings. Some really interesting stuff, wonderful folk art. and really influential in the Taos art scene. But this is all laid out with a compass, so you can get a nice, reliable layout. It's quite easy to do this. One compass setting does all of this. Although I will come back and define the center lines on each one of these, I guess you'd call them flower petals. I certainly would not take this as a tutorial on how to do any wood carving. I am really inexperienced, and like I say, it's been many years since I've done anything very seriously, and some of my tools really need sharpening. They've been sitting around and bumping up against each other in drawers and boxes for way too long, and I'm going to need to spend a day just maintaining tools. My first inclination is to clean this up with a V-gouge, and unfortunately this gouge kind of wants to tear. I think it needs to still be sharper. And while this seems like a good idea, I'm not real happy with the way this is coming out. And we'll look at a different method here in a minute. The center, I'm going to go ahead and use a chip carving knife. And this will define the center section of the little flower petal. And all I'm doing is establishing lines to cut to. This is not really a chip carving. I'm just using the knife to establish some lines here. Then I'm going to clear the material out with a gouge. By the time I'm done with both panels, I get a lot better at this. I'm going to use a chip carving knife now to define the edges of the petals. This really worked much better than the V-gouge. You can see the piece over on the left there that's really kind of ragged. That's a lot of trouble to clean up. I'm not going to worry about it too much because it really kind of goes along with this style of carving. And I think some irregularities and imperfections actually enhance the look to some degree. The one thing I don't want is for this to look like it was carved by a CNC machine. I want it to very much have a hand-done look. And even in the Fetchin House work that this is based on, you can see places where the carvings had little chip-outs, tear-outs, things like that. And they were not perfect, but they're absolutely wonderful to look at, and they have so much life and character. Things that you don't get with too much perfection. Like I say, this is not a carving tutorial, and I am not going to show this entire carving. As I do more of this kind of work, and I want to do a lot more of it, we'll start looking at more detail in the carving. But I want to get a little bit better of an idea of what I'm really doing before I start showing too much of that on video. Now the joinery here, I'm going to use dowel joints. This is a Dowel Max dowel jig. It's supposed to be one of the best dowel jigs out there. In the past, I have had really bad luck with dowel joints and getting things to line up. So this is another thing that's kind of going out on a limb for here. And depending on which rail I'm working on, some of them have room for a lot of dowel joints, like the bottom one, and some of them don't have much room, and I have to go to 1/4 inch dowels for some of this. But luckily I went ahead and splurged for the 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch, and 1/4 inch options, so I've got all of that available for this dowel jig. And it seems to work pretty well. The only question is, will all of these dowels, I think there's 10 dowels per style, line up the way they're supposed to? And this is a case where the tool worked just as advertised, and every single one of these dowels lines up. And I think I'm going to have real good, strong connections by using the dowel joints. It is a little bit fiddly to get all of this assembled, and I'm probably working right to the limit of working time for the glue, but I think everything went pretty well. After building that shop door, I decided I really wanted to do more doors, and this project confirms that. And I have probably a dozen doors between the house and the shop that I would like to build. Some of them will be simple doors with no ornamentation, just to seal up an opening. But others will be of this style, different approaches to joinery, some hand carving, things like that. And I haven't decided if I should make videos about most of those doors. It could end up to the point that almost every video on this channel is about building a door more so than other things. But if you like the door videos, then I will probably video more of them. If you'd rather see other things, I'll just get on with building the doors and only show one every now and then, and that way I actually get the doors done faster and free up time for other things like finishing that miter saw station in the background. Anyways, let me know what you think. No promises one way or the other. And probably for the summer, I'm still going to be working mostly on the cabin project. This is probably my last significant woodworking project for the winter and the spring. In summer, we'll work on the cabin and try and get that all closed in. And then late fall and early winter, we'll be back to working down here in the basement workshop more. Although if I have little projects, I may include videos on that. Not everything needs to be a big project. Naturally, it's just a hair out of square, but with the miracle of the ratchet strap, it's pretty easy to pull the corners down just a hair. It's only about a 1/16 of an inch off, didn't need much. No matter how good the lineup, always need a little sanding to make sure the joints are level. But the dowel joints did a wonderful job, and it took very little sanding to level everything up. Mostly I'm erasing all the pencil marks from all my layout work. Now that opening for the screen frame, the router bit leaves a rounded edge and that needs to be squared up. I decided to wait and do this after it was all assembled so that I knew everything was in line and right where it was supposed to be. Once again, I'm using pine tar. This is a natural dark pine tar from Sage Restoration, and it's cut 50-50 with raw linseed oil. I just love what this does to this pine. It just really makes it jump out, and the carvings are so much more dramatic with this finish on it than they were in the plain basswood. Luckily, the basswood takes the finish about the same as the pine, and unless you really know your woods, which I really don't, you probably won't notice any difference between the basswood panels and the pine door frame. Now I need to make the screen frame. And for that I need another notch, but this I'm going to do all the way through and use miter joints. I also need little screen moldings to help hold it in. I don't have enough material to cut both of these, so I'm actually cutting the screen molding out of the piece that I'm using for the frame. I hope that makes sense. I think in this next cut you can see what I'm talking about a little bit better. But by doing this with a regular saw blade on the table saw instead of a dado stack or a router, I end up getting just the piece I need for the screen molding. without having to use another piece of material. Now you want to round up the edges of the screen molding, no reason for anything sharp. This is a little Stanley 928 edge rounder that I think I paid $1 for at an antique store many years ago. Miter joints are one of those things that be a little bit hard to deal with and get to clamp up just right. One of the big reasons I am not a picture framer. These quarter clamping squares sort of do okay clamping this up, but it isn't perfect, and I do end up with a few little gaps. They aren't going to hurt anything in the long run, but it's less than ideal. If I do a lot more things like this, I may invest in some better clamping system or figure out a way to put some kind of clamping calls on there that guarantee a good clamp up for this. But I am going to drill through the joint and insert a dowel, and this is really where most of the strength comes from. And I really don't have any worries about the screen frame falling apart in the future. Although I will reinforce it just a little bit with some forged corner brackets. These are simple brackets with a forge welded corner on them, good forge welding practice. I did not make a video about making these brackets, but we will look at the corner forge weld at some point in the future over on the Black Bear Forge channel. In the past, I've had real problems getting screen too tight and bending and bowing the screen frames. So on this one, I'm trying to be very careful not to overstretch the screen. I'm just going to use these clamps as a little bit of a weight. This pulls some tension on the screen, and unfortunately, it could have been a little bit tighter. It's a little bit floppy in there, but it isn't wrinkled, and it's really not going to hurt anything. If the floppiness annoys us in the future, the screen frame is removable. I'll take it out and I'll see if I can fix it. And those screen moldings go on with some little brads. With the kind of rustic folk art carvings, a pine tar finish, and these forged brackets with a black finish on it, I really like the look of this door, and it's going to get hand-forged hinges. I will be making a video about the hinges. It's one of those things I still don't have completed, but I need to do the hinges, and I need to finish trimming out the door frame. And those will both be separate videos. Here we can get kind of a look at what the finished door is going to look like, just give you a little bit of a preview. I'll show it in more detail in one of those future videos, but at least you get a chance to see what the carvings look like on the bottom of the door. Now the screen frame does need to be held in place, and I'm going to put some little wooden toggles. These will swivel out of the way so I can get the screen frame out if we ever need to replace it or change it for some reason. These are just little pieces of scrap wood off the end of the screen moldings that I drilled a hole in and put a little bevel on just so they look better. Nothing very fancy at all, but that's all we need. I do hope you enjoyed the video. We will get back to this project looking at how I trim out the door and the log wall and deal with all the irregular surfaces and the extra wide door jamb and all that kind of stuff. All things that you don't really do in normal construction, but in log construction, you gotta be a little bit creative. So we'll look at that in another video right here on the John Switzer channel, and we will look at making the hand-forged hinges. They're gonna be an L-style hinge with pintles. We'll do that over on the Black Bear Forge channel, and hopefully we'll have both of those videos done in the next 2 or 3 weeks so we can see this project completed. Then most of my efforts are going to be moving up to the cabin project, try and get that closed in this summer. And I have no idea how much work I'll need to put in up there. So my plan is to get started up there in the next few weeks and allow myself all summer and into the fall if necessary. If we get it done in a couple of months, then we'll be back to doing other projects. In the meantime, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next video.